Far too many business owners and entrepreneurs focus on building a business and not a brand. On this Branding Bites podcast, I dish out bite-sized strategies to keep your personal brand front and center to make a more significant impact and see bigger results in your business. Hey there, it's Kristen Korn, and you're listening to the Branding Bites podcast, episode number 31. The emotional effects of a career pivot no one talks about. Today, I want to talk about a subject that is completely swept under the rug when it comes to job or career pivots. And that is the emotional effect of pivoting your career path. So if you've listened to this podcast for some time and you went to episode 11, it was called My One Unexpected Joy from 2019 that could bring you more clarity. I shared how at the beginning of 2019, I made a big decision to shake up my business priorities, to put my personal brand marketing business front and center, and move my direct sales business in the back burner. I had mentioned that I was now investing in myself and in my business. Instead of putting all of my energy into a direct sales business and a team that I couldn't technically control the income from, and my honestly, just my passion was dissolving for. I think when you start living in your purpose, where God put you to be, you can easily tell the things that don't align to your lane, and you're like, I've got to get rid of this. So to update you from that episode, which was taped 5 months ago, I've taken a further step in that direction I mentioned, and I sold the direct sales business I had grown for almost 8 years. Yes, I sold it, which is a great opportunity to have. It has been a month since the sale of that business. And even though I know to my core I am on the right path, God keeps nudging me on to be, there is a bit of a mourning process that happens that no one talks about. And even though I wasn't fired or let go from this job, leaving that position that I had been in for, a significant amount of time, that is an emotional loss, even if, I'm excited, to be moving on to greater opportunities. So I'm going to open this can of worms. And today I want to give you my experience so far with the transition, so that in the case that you may pivot your career someday, you'll know that you're not alone when you feel these things during and after that transition. And some of the emotions, they were all on the same day, and some of them were felt on different days, different weeks, whatever, after the pivot, but they're there and they're real, and I believe we need to talk about them. And luckily, I did have other colleagues going through a very similar transition. So leaning on each other, that was super valuable. So if you're ever pivoting, try to find someone else you can relate to. So the first emotional effect was loss. When I left my direct sales business, it was on my own terms and my time. With that company, it was for the most part a great experience. I gained a great deal of fulfillment and professional growth from my time with the company, and achieved, many trips and titles, and especially new friendships because of it. So to step away from it does leave you with kind of this little hole inside for a little bit, a real loss. And not compared to death, but there is a real mourning period where you do a lot of reflecting on the good times, a little bit of the bad, but most of the good times in the experience you had with the company and the people in it. Since I did sell my business and handed it over to someone else to run, there was also that sense of jealousy and sadness that you feel. That when all that emotion comes rolling in, and then you feel guilt. I was leaving my team behind to go do something else, right? Because there is people involved, which that's the hardest part, I think. And even though, it was a business decision and not just like a personal one, there's still this bit of guilt that does come over you. Like, did I do enough to create the success that they deserve? Like, what could I have done differently? Am I really supposed to be leaving them? Did I fail them? Am I letting them down by leaving the team to somebody else? But in this time, I really had to dig into why I sold the business in the first place. And I believe that company was the stepping stone to get me to where I am to go next. It was not the end of my story. God dropped that team into my life so I could learn something from each of them. I know I was not the perfect leader, and I am totally okay with that. At times, and I told my team this, I let accolades control my actions. I let titles and things get in the way of what really mattered, which is the person. It's the people. But in the end, I did what I thought I was supposed to do. It turns out, as I teach now, I should have kept to my core beliefs and not cared what others wanted me to do. And I have learned thousands of lessons from those 8 years that will make me a better person leading into my next 8 years. God has shown me over and over, like the last 2+ years, that my brand and business skills can help so many more people. And it was time to expand my business and do just that. Pivot my story as I stay in my lane. By being 1 foot in and 1 foot out of that direct sales company, and more specifically the team we had built, I was in a sense like holding myself back from my true potential. I never want to say like, oh, I'll never do anything else, because I don't know what God has planned for me. And this was an example of this. When I started with that company back in 2012, I had no intention of ever selling it. I mean, why would I sell a business I worked so hard to build and recruit for? But when my heart kept leading me away from it, I knew I needed to pivot and to let it go. And one of the emotions that I've also felt was anger. And maybe a better word would be disappointment. But it was disappointment toward the actions of different people in the organization, people who I had before really looked up to and thought we were friends. And then we all know, there's always going to be people who don't understand your decisions. They don't agree with them. But this was definitely true, and it happened when I left that company. There were several people who, they say that, oh, we care about you, we put people first, but you come to unfortunately realize that that's just kind of like a front. They put you first when you're helping them advance, but that's not the case anymore, and you aren't making decisions based on their success. That's when they go radio silent. Not even like, I wish you the best, nothing. So that has been definitely the hardest thing to swallow. People who you thought you'd be friends with no matter what, like if you're in this job or that company, they decide to ditch you, quite honestly. But again, only you get to set your limits in your life. So other people are not allowed to do that for you. So yes, in a sense, they were limiting me, and that's just more reason for me to leave, right? In my experience, they were actually leaders within the organization, but this type of disappointment, they can come from a lot of different directions. So maybe a spouse or a best friend or peers or other employees, team members, industry leaders, or anyone who your ear listens to. As Ryan Lestrange says, you didn't do anything to them. You just grew beyond the limit they set for you, and that got them so mad. They forgot that only God sets the limits. So knowing that I was following where God wanted me to go and where I felt comfortable moving into, like I can forgive very easily, but I can see how some can hold on to that anger a lot longer than I did. But it is a process. A few of the emotions that I never felt was regret, worry, or feeling like I was losing my identity by leaving. Again, because I had centered my brand around who I was as Kristen Korn, I wasn't confined to that one company. that was something I took very seriously a few years ago. And because of that, never felt like I was going to lose who people knew me as. I mean, they might have known, oh, she worked for that company, or she was a part of that company. I was a part of that company, but it's not who I was. It's not the only thing people knew me for. I was and I am more than that company. And I feel like along the way, I've positioned myself that way. So that was like a really good transition for me. I did not have that feeling of ever losing my identity. And whatever we're doing, change, like it's never easy. I mean, heck, moving from one state to another for my husband to take a new coaching position, like that is not easy. But I believe it's the only way we grow into who we are to become. Like if we stay there, we're never going to grow. We just get super comfortable with our surroundings. And even though emotional effects such as loss, guilt, anger, worry, regret, and loss of identity, like they may happen, just never lose track of who you are meant to become. So I wanted to get that out. Maybe it's a healing process for me, but as I wrap up this episode, do not ever let one person's post or one person's happiness, what you think they're acting like they're happy after you're gone, or one person's like anything, get you out of the lane that God has built for you already. I am not about to let my influence go to waste, and you shouldn't either. All right, purpose-driven CEOs, until next time, keep putting purpose behind your brand, and thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Branding Bites podcast. I'd love to hear from you, so hop on over to Instagram at Stay in Your Lane Brand and drop a comment. And if you're feeling extra gracious, please leave a review wherever you caught this podcast. You can dive into the show notes for this episode and all episodes at brandingbitespodcast.com. And if you love this podcast, please share it with a friend. Thanks for tuning in.